Today I'm going to show you how to knit your perfect pumpkin. So grab your needles and let's get started. You are going to need some DK weight yarn. I'm using this orange colour. Some scrap yarn for the stem. I'm using brown, and some round knitted needles. I'm using 6mm needles, that's US 10 or UK 4. You will also need some double pointed needles for the stem, a stitch marker, a darning needle and some scissors. To start, we're going to cast on 72 stitches, where we're going to knit 11 stitches and purl 1 and repeat this 6 times for the 6 indents in the pumpkin. You can make your pumpkin smaller by using thinner yarn, smaller needles and fewer stitches, or you can make your pumpkin bigger by using chunkier yarn, cast on more stitches, or using chunkier needles. For reference, this green pumpkin was knitted with 12 knit stitches and 2 purl stitches. The purl stitches just makes it easier at the end to cinch in the pumpkin. This smaller pumpkin was knitted with 8 knit stitches and 1 purl stitch. Make sure you have a generous tail end, and we're now going to cast on 72 stitches with the long tail cast on. I will link the long tail cast on method below, but for now just make a slip knot, tighten it on the needle, and with your index finger and your thumb you make this sort of slingshot with your fingers. You're then going to take the needle and you touch your thumb, pick up that yarn, over and grab the yarn you're holding with your index finger and through the loop you created with your thumb, and there you have your first stitch. We're now going to cast on 72 of these. When you have 72 stitches cast on, lay it flat and make sure the ridge on the inside isn't twisted. You're then going to pick up the needles with your right hand, and with your left hand loop the working yarn over your finger and hold it with the rest of your fingers that also hold the needles. You are now ready to start knitting, and you go in through the back of the loop with your right needle, grab the working yarn and pull it back through the loop and slip the stitch of your left needle. I will link a how to knit video below where it shows you in more detail how to do the knit stitch. You have now knitted 11 stitches and you're ready to purl your first stitch. So you take your working yarn in front of the needle, go in through the front of the loop, grab your working yarn and pull it back through the loop like so. I will link an in-depth purl tutorial below. You will continue in this pattern, knitting 11 and purling 1 until you've done the first round on your needles, and then you're going to place a stitch marker. We're now going to keep knitting until the work measures 15 to 20 centimeters, which is 6 to 8 inches. Now that I'm happy with my length, I'm going to start closing up the top of the pumpkin. So what we're going to do then is we're going to take a long tail end, make sure it's long, because we're going to use this to cinch up the pumpkin a bit later. We're going to put the tail end on our darning needle, and then we're going to start moving the stitches from our needles onto our darning needle and the tail end. We're now going to start pulling on that tail end to cinch up the top of the pumpkin, like so. Make sure you're not pulling too hard because you don't want the tail end to snap. When you're happy with it, we're going to put some extra stitches around the top to make sure this stays in place. We're going to stuff the pumpkin, and you can use either soft toy filling or scrap yarn or scrap fabrics. We're now going to close up the bottom of the pumpkin, and you're going to use the long tail end that you left when you started the pumpkin, and we're going to do a couple of stitches where you go in and come out on the same side. We're going to do that all the way around the pumpkin. When you've done the stitches all around, we're going to close that gap by pulling on the tail end, and we're then going to do a couple of stitches around the side to secure it. We are now going to shape the pumpkin, and we're going to do that by putting our darning needle into the middle and making sure it comes out circa in the middle at the bottom as well. And we're going to pull the yarn through. Again, from the top, we're going to put our darning needle in through the middle and coming out the other side. And when we pull this tight, we're going to make sure that the tail end is lining up with the purl stitch. Pull on the tail to tighten it to create that pumpkin look. We will do this 6 times so that we cover all 6 purl stitches. You now have a nearly finished pumpkin, and all we have left to do now is create the stem. So all you're going to need for the stem is some scrap yarn, 2 double-pointed knitting needles, a darning needle, scissors, and your pumpkin. We will start by casting on 3 stitches. We are then going to knit those 3 stitches. And when you have knitted those 3 stitches, you're going to slide them over to the other side of the needle. Do not turn your needle. Your working yarn will be towards the back, but that's fine. You're just going to knit as normal. Keep going until you reached your desired length. When you have reached your desired length, we're going to cast off. And you do this by knitting 2 stitches and then pulling the first stitch over the second stitch. Make sure you're leaving a generous tail end, as we're going to use this to attach the stalk to the pumpkin. But first we're going to secure the end by pulling the thread through the I-cord, like so. Making sure you can't see the thread on either side. Thread the tail ends and then we're going to pull it through the pumpkin. Make sure you've decided which side is up and which side is down, and when you're ready you're just going to pull the needle through the middle, pull it through, all that's left to do now is securing the stem to the pumpkin, and we're going to do that by a tiny little stitch at the bottom, just like so. You can now cut the thread and your pumpkin is ready. If you liked this tutorial, I really appreciate a follow, a comment or a like on my video, and let me know what you would like to see a tutorial on next. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.